professional experience when I was applying to my first job as well. But what I did do is in my 4 years while I was in my bachelor's, and even folks who are right now, like, as part of this program, or even if you're finishing a bachelor's degree, I would say definitely focus on the projects. And I think that's one of the good things with a cohort like this, where you will have those projects to kind of build and showcase. For each project that you've got, kind of talk about which tech stack that you worked on. For example, maybe you worked on Python, maybe you did JavaScript, maybe you just simply worked on a database. You built out a database solution, so you have a good understanding of how MySQL works, for example. So I would say instead of calling it work experience, you could list it on your resume as professional experience, because this is something that you are doing professionally as a software developer. So list those out as your professional experience on your resume. And then for each experience item, you can basically tag each project. So it's good to have like 2 or 3 different projects on your resume that you can call out. So definitely have your objective, your summary, where you want to say, like, what are you looking for? Are you looking to be an AI engineer? Are you looking to be a data scientist? Maybe you're looking to be a pure software engineer. And even within software engineer, there's so many fields. Like maybe you want to be a full stack web developer. Maybe you want to be someone who works in the embedded space, meaning that you want to work on code that runs on actual hardware. Like you want to write C code that runs on your iPhone or something like that. So kind of try to have that niche in your summary at the top, and then kind of call out a quick summary of what your current tech stack is. And then even if you have no experience, have your professional experience listed that as your projects and what did you learn in each of those projects.
Okay, that is really good. Like I love the part where you mentioned professional experience rather than like work experience, because I know like that is one of the biggest questions that we get, that people ask us, like, I'm just starting out, I'm just working on projects. What do I need to include? And yeah, you've been working in the tech space for over a decade. So yeah. And I would say that you've definitely like encountered like beginners, maybe
For
like
sure.
in tech. And when you are encountering like resumes with like beginners or trying to like help preview resumes in the past or currently, what are the common red flags that you've seen in like resumes that you feel, oh, this could have been better, especially for like people that are just starting out, or even people that are also in the space for quite a while?
Yeah. So one thing that I see is either the first thing I see is that if the resume is too long, like if it's like 3 pages, 4 pages, it's kind of like, oh, this candidate did not take the time or the effort to kind of condense it for me to understand what is their strength. So like, for example, like for myself, we get tons of resumes that we need to review for interns, for new grads, for folks who are kind of transitioning into the same level as me, and sometimes even for levels higher than me. So if a person has been like, let's say they've had a long career, someone who's even, maybe someone who's transitioning from one career to another, they're maybe moving from real estate into software development. One of the other things I do is I also teach the BrainStation cohort for software development, very similar to DataCamp. So in my cohorts as well, I've taught 2 cohorts now. I have a lot of students who are transitioning from other industries, like maybe nursing, real estate, into tech. And the thing that I want to say is that if you have those experiences, definitely list those, but don't make it too long. Like a red flag would be that if they put all of their experience, all of the 3 to 4 pages of experience and expect me to kind of go through every single one. So I think that is the first sign that that's the lack of effort, that the candidate did not make that effort to reduce it down to, for me or anyone else who's reviewing it, to kind of immediately understand what is the value that they're bringing to the team. Second red flag is like, for example, if it's not formatted properly, indentation is looking off, there's typos, there's, spelling mistakes for, some simple words on there. So those are like very small things, which I think some beginners might tend to have if they have not proofread their resume. And right now with a lot of AI tools, it's so much easier to kind of just, upload your resume to able to catch your spelling mistakes. It's not something that you need to actively even work on. So I think things like that. So having no spelling mistakes, making sure the indentation is correct, formatting is good, and it's not too detailed. Like it shouldn't be excessively detailed if you're someone who's transitioning or someone who has experience. And even for someone like myself who's got more than 10 years, I struggle as well. Like definitely I think everyone should have that one resume that has every single thing you've worked on. That can be like 10 pages, 20 pages, as long as you want. And that's what you keep in your, I would say, in your private folder. But when you're applying to that job, you want to make sure that you're pulling out stuff from that big resume of 7 or 8 pages, and then only condense it down to one or at most 2 pages. So that's kind of one of the red flags I see, that the candidate maybe didn't do the effort and they're just like, here's my resume with everything I've done. I'm just going to send this one resume out for you to kind of consume and figure out why I'm good for the job.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with the part of like condensing and not making it so lengthy. Like we want to oversell ourselves, and I mean, it can really be overwhelming for the person that is reviewing it. We do have like some cohort members that are transitioning from one field to another, that they've probably had experience, like over 5 years of experience in another industry, and want to transition to tech. And I believe this will be helpful for them to also know that, oh yeah, you don't need to list everything, maybe just a few of transferable skills. And you mentioned
Exactly.
something related to like formatting. And my next question is regarding like bullet points. I know like for people that have been in the industry for a while, they probably have a lot of like measurable impact that they could put on the resume. But for beginners, that can be a little bit, and because they work on like projects or capstone projects, just like the way we are currently setting it up, how can they better format that bullet to show something like that, to show an impactful or a measurable impact project, basically?
I would say for folks who are transitioning, kind of coming into a new career, or even if you are kind of, even the folks who are transitioning because they don't have that existing experience in the industry, I don't think it's immediately expected that they would have a lot of measurable impact because they haven't done that work professionally. But I would say it would be better to call out in that case if you're a beginner to what is the skill that you acquired in this. So if you're kind of looking to apply to more, say, senior roles or a little bit more, like staff software engineer or something like that, that's kind of where the measurable impact comes in because they're expecting that you already have, done that professionally somewhere. But if you're new, if you're just graduating or you're coming out of a cohort, transitioning careers, they're not really looking potentially for that measurable impact, but you're looking to come in as somebody who will kind of come into this role and then do that impact. And the way you will drive that impact in the role that you're applying to is by having that knowledge. So the focus should more be on the tech skill that you acquired as part of that project, as part of that the boot camp, or like maybe if you work in a specific project, maybe you learn three specific skills on there. So kind of highlighting those three specific skills that in this project, I was able to kind of work on this, I was able to achieve this. And then maybe over time, if that's a project that is still ongoing, if you're releasing version 1, version 2 of the project, if that's something that is active, if there's an active GitHub on there, you can kind of talk about the improvements that you made to that project, like released V1 that had the ability to surface, for example, let's say you built an app in your own free time, or you built a data set and you're like, from this data I was able to pull this information and use it for this version 2. It's kind of working on this, so that kind of also shows your growth. But if you're applying for more beginner roles, even if you don't have that measurable impact, that's okay, because what we're really looking for in those beginner roles is the tech skill that you already have, so that we can coach you, train you, and then integrate you into the role. And then from there you will have those measurable KPIs that, oh, I improved this process by 30%, or I reduce the latency by X percentage or something. So those kind of things come in more when you're in a professional role. If you're a beginner and you just have projects, I would say focus on kind of understanding exactly what is the tech skill that you have from that specific project and highlighting that as a bullet point in the experience. Oh, sorry, I think you're on mute.
All right, thank you. Oh, thank you so much for highlighting
No
that.
worries.
And yeah, to our audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the comment section. But I will go ahead with the ones that we have here. I know you mentioned briefly about like there are some AI tools when it comes to like resume. Can you shed more light on how they can use like AI tools to be able to, draft and fine tune their resume?
Definitely. So I think one of the things I also personally struggle with, and I'm sure lots of folks on the call also do, is we tend to write very long sentences, a very run-on sentence, like, in this project I used X tool and I used Y tool and I analyzed X, and then from there I was able to kind of make Y. So that whole run-on sentence, I think, can definitely be used with, you can use some tool like Perplexity or ChatGPT, any of these AI tools that are available to kind of condense and shorten those sentences down and make them as impactful as possible. The other thing I think with AI tools is one of the great things is you can take a job description and put it into an AI tool, and it'll kind of say, okay, this is kind of what, like, please summarize what are the 5 skills that this job is looking for. They specifically want someone who, for example, knows, they need to know Python, they need to know, React, they need to know specifically Kubernetes or Docker. Like maybe those are some of the tech skills that that role needs specifically. So have the AI kind of analyze that and then go back into your big resume, the one that has all of your projects, all of your work experience, even stuff that you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, all of that work experience. And you can kind of say, okay, analyze document one, analyze document two, and then kind of see, okay, where do I have those skills? And then kind of build a second resume that you then use that condensed resume to apply for the role. So initially earlier, I would do this myself. I'm sure lots of folks would do this themselves. Like you would have that one big resume with all these projects. But when you're applying to a role, I think it's very important to look at the job description of the role and say, okay, in this role, they're looking for a developer, an engineer, a data scientist, an AI engineer who does X, Y, Z. And then kind of making sure that your resume, the first experience, the second experience, the third experience, they all kind of translate to that role, to that job description, so that when the reviewer is looking at it, they're able to quickly see, okay, I need a person who knows X, Y, Z. I can see right away on page one of their resume, in their first experience, in their second experience, they've got X, Y, and Z. Perfect. This candidate has that information. Maybe I want to see what else have they got. Do they have the requirements? Maybe they need a degree. Maybe they need to have got a cohort. Maybe they're located in the same city as me, or can they work remotely? Like that, that becomes a secondary check. The first check that I do is I need a person who has XYZ skills. And on this resume, I can see right away they said, I have X, I have Y, I have Z. So doing that with AI tools is a lot easier now. It was a manual process before. I highly encourage folks to use any AI tools available to you. Like Perplexity is a really great one. You don't even need to create an account. ChatGPT is really great. Also Claude. So in any of these tools, essentially, you can take the job description that is there, kind of condense it down to say, tell me what are these 5 skills it needs. Look at your own resume and say, okay, this is all of my skills. And then even you'll be able to understand, I don't have XYZ. Okay, cool. I don't have XYZ. No problem. What do I need to do, study, learn to get XYZ? It's not a deterrent. It's kind of just for you to understand. And then once you have those bullet points, you also use ChatGPT to kind of make them, as crisp and short and concise as possible to so that you kind of, because another thing is that you only have 2 pages. So, and you want to convey as much value as possible. The ChatGPT or Perplexity are good tools to kind of, help you condense those sentences down. So that's kind of what I meant by, use some AI tools in that capacity to kind of help understand, or condense your resume for when you're applying.
Oh, great. I will also like pick some points for myself anyway. So
Of course.
thank you
That's
for
amazing.
mentioning that. Oh, thank you for mentioning that. Like we've covered like and some important questions regarding like the resume writing. And we'll just like move a little bit to like LinkedIn optimization, because I mean the professional platform right now is also one of the best ways to connect with professionals or experts in your field, recruiters and all. And because these are cohorts, we have some people that have not like that are just starting out in learning how to use LinkedIn, especially how to position themselves for the current markets. And when it comes to like beginners or even people that are also that have started using it, what is the best way to connect with people you don't know personally on LinkedIn? Because I know that is also the part um that where people get confused. Do I just connect with them? Do I introduce myself? What is the best way to connect with people personally on LinkedIn?
I think it's the one of the really great simple ways is obviously to go to networking events, like in your city, even if you go to virtual networking events, because maybe you're in a city that does not have a lot of physical in-person networking events, so that shouldn't be a deterrent. We live like there's Zoom, there's lots of tools online. So you can go to like an event like this where you have the ability to kind of connect with other folks and expand your circle. So I think the best way, of course, is if you've actually met that person in either a networking event, it could be physical, it could be virtual, either networking event that you go to. So as much exposure as possible would be great because you can kind of meet a person, talk to them, understand, what their skill set are. You can kind of understand their industry. So I think networking in person is definitely a great way, in person or virtually is a great way to connect with folks on LinkedIn and to kind of build that network, kind of get more people on your LinkedIn as well, because the more people you have, when they post things, you might learn something that is of value to you. Maybe they have a free course, maybe they know about a job opening, maybe they know about a volunteer opportunity, maybe they know about a freelance project that you can pick up. There's so many things that you can learn on LinkedIn as you expand your network. So the first thing I would say is, of course, encourage folks is, try to make it as, real or in person as possible or known. And by in person, I don't mean just like physical events, even the virtual networking events. That would be the first thing, like going to those networking events, like putting yourself out there to kind of say, hey, I'm a software developer, I'm a data scientist, I've just finished this cohort with TechNovelle, I finished this cohort with DataCamp, and I've worked on these projects. I'm currently learning X, I'm working on Y. what is something that you're working on? What is your industry like kind of having that genuine interest with the person. Even if you go to a networking event, there's probably, 10, 20, 30 people on there. If you get one or two connections, that is even, a good enough metric. Like you don't need to push yourself and say, I need to meet all 10. Like even if you build a good connection with one or two people, add them to your LinkedIn, stay connected, that would be, that would be great. That would be sufficient. The other thing is, of course, if there's no networking events, there's not that many virtual events that you can go to. I would say also maybe sometimes there are people on LinkedIn who are actively posting things. They're sharing, content. There are recruiters on there. So if you are ready to apply for a role, if your resume is ready, you've finished your cohort, you've optimized your LinkedIn, you've optimized your resume, you've optimized your GitHub profile, then in that case, you can potentially reach out to folks who have that recruiter title open, or even the ones who have hiring on their title. That is kind of for you to reach out to them and say, hey, I noticed on your LinkedIn that you have that little circle that says you're hiring. I noticed that you're a recruiter at company X in this city. I'm looking for jobs in this particular field, and this is my resume. If something comes across, please let me know. So I think kind of targeting the folks who are in recruiting roles and in hiring roles is better, rather than just going and someone who's a software engineer at Google. Like don't just go connect with them, because that seems like, I don't know you, I've never met you, I'm just a software engineer, you're trying to connect with me. And then and many times the software engineer cannot really do much with your resume. They're like, I don't really have a person, thanks for your resume, but I can't do much. So it might also come across as potentially like, this is the person who's just spamming everybody. So you don't want to come across as somebody who's spamming. So definitely try to reach out to folks who have that recruiter title, who have that hiring title on there, and then go to networking events, virtual, in person, as many as possible, and try to build that one or two connections with folks who can potentially help you, or you can learn from them. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's really great. I mean, the virtual events as well. So the in-person is not just an excuse not to enhance your or make good use of the networking. There are a lot of virtual events specific to the industry that you can attend. And thank you for mentioning that. And I know one of the questions that we have was pointing to like imposter syndrome around, oh yeah, I just started like using LinkedIn and I don't know how to better post. So the question was framed around like, what are small things that beginners can do weekly, or like weekly or timely, to make their LinkedIn more attractive, just to make their LinkedIn profile more attractive? Are there activities they need to do, or something that they need to do differently when they are just starting out on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So for myself, I'm guilty. I don't post on LinkedIn as much, personally. So I don't do as much to make my LinkedIn better, but definitely for folks who are transitioning, who are looking to kind of build that audience, build that connection. I will say that even with LinkedIn, there's different roles in tech that that there are folks who are kind of very customer focused. There are folks who kind of are in developer relations. So if you are more in a role that kind of interfaces directly with the customer of your product, or the person who's going to be using your app, having that social media presence is definitely very, very helpful. Maybe you're looking at going into sales engineering, but if you're looking at more being a focused developer, you're looking at being more of a backend person, you're not really looking too much on the business side of interacting with a customer, working with a customer, having that extreme LinkedIn presence where you're kind of always in the conversation is not necessarily as important. But it is always good to build that presence, because you want to have the other aspect, I would say, is that when you're a new person, when you're a beginner, the social validation of your experience is also important. So the social validation comes from your GitHub profile, for example. Like you've worked on a project, you've uploaded your repository to GitHub. Things that you could do as a developer, a data scientist, a person who's looking to transition into AI engineering, would be to kind of share that kind of content on your LinkedIn. So something that you said weekly, like if you obviously folks don't have a new project that they can post weekly, that's a little bit difficult to do. So I would say if you're trying to get active on LinkedIn, kind of batch your content into three different categories. All social media content typically falls into the bucket of either you want to inform, you want to educate, or you want to entertain. So those are the three categories of social media content. LinkedIn entertain is very limited. It's not really something like Instagram. It's not really something like TikTok or Twitter where you can have entertainment, unless you're trying to share like a cartoon or a comic. This is like, oh, let me explain DNS to you in a simple term. Let me explain to you how, what MySQL is with a cartoon comic. So that is kind of like a technical entertainment, but that's very rare. So what you're really looking to do on LinkedIn is to inform or educate with your own posts. So an information, something that you want to inform folks could be, oh, I completed this DataCamp cohort, or I completed this certification, or I finished this project, and I would like to kind of inform you all that this is the project that I built, and this is what it looks like. Here's my GitHub repo. This is where it's hosted live. That is kind of you informing people and kind of putting that post out there. The second bucket for you to post would be the educate content. You could say something like, oh, here's an article I read and it taught me XYZ, so here's, go read this article. It might, teach you this. Or here's a course I took. Here's a free course I took. Here's a paid course I took. Here's a conference I went to. I went to this conference and I learned XYZ. Or here's a networking event I went to where the host talked to me. Like, here's a webinar I went to with TechNovelle and DataCamp, and I learned these three things. And, just kind of post that on there. So you're kind of trying to educate. So those are the two buckets of content you could potentially post on LinkedIn if you're looking to grow your LinkedIn. And then weekly, what you can also do is if you're following recruiters, you're following people who have like, that LinkedIn top voice, you could potentially read. They do also post a lot of the same information and educate content. So you can engage in a couple of those posts. You can simply just repost it and say, oh, I saw this article by this recruiter about how you can use AI to optimize your LinkedIn and your resume, and then just repost that article so that kind of goes with your network. If not repost, you can either comment on it and say, oh, I found this article really insightful. If you did, actually don't lie. Of course, if you did find something insightful and useful, comment that, let them know. So I think those are some small things that you could do, kind of, focus on, like maybe once a week you want to do something inform, once a week you want to do something educate, engage in post, because once you engage in post, that also gets shared out with your network and that brings your profile up. So it also kind of builds your social validation over time that, oh yeah, this is a person who's been on LinkedIn for 3 months, for 6 months, for 2 years, 5 years. They've been engaging in posts, they've been posting content. So it kind of builds that social validation up. And you don't have to overdo it, of course. Like, you don't have to be like, I need to do this every day. Of course, if you're in a business role, you're an entrepreneur, that makes sense. Maybe you do need to do it every day. But as someone who's just starting out or transitioning or a beginner, like limited engagement, just sharing a post, sharing a repost, and then even you can, if there's that imposter syndrome of I have nothing to post. So once you're starting out, do like, you can do reposts, and then when you're more confident, you can do your own posts. That's how I will say you could do, stuff to do with LinkedIn.
Great. I mean, that is well packed. Thank you for like sharing that. Thank you so much. And I want to take us back to resume because someone sent like a personal message regarding like resume right now. And the person asks that should resume be one page or is 2 pages acceptable now for beginners?
One page is typically, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know you touched based on it briefly, but I think the person wants to ask the follow-up question regarding that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. For beginner, one page is great. It's sufficient. You don't need to do more than one page. If you do have more, like maybe you're someone who's a beginner but transitioning from other industry or something, then in that case, if you have 2 pages, that's also fine. I would just say that more than 2 pages is a little bit much. So that's why definitely try never to go more than 2 pages, because it's just, not possible to kind of get through. When folks are reviewing it. And then it comes to us as level two. It usually goes through a recruiter, level one. So even before I get to see your resume, it goes to the recruiter. So you want to make sure that they're not looking through it like it's too much. With a beginner, someone who's fresh, just graduated bachelor's, maybe they have no internships, no experience, maybe one or two. One page is sufficient. It should be able to kind of communicate and get that skill in there. If you are someone who's transitioning, 2 pages is good. I would say it's max. And if you have stuff that is maybe more than 6 or 7 years old, you don't necessarily need to list that skill unless it's something like, oh, I did this thing 10 years ago, and this is something that can potentially help in this role as well. Then you can kind of mention it. But anything more than, 6 or 7 years, or if you do have that experience, you can kind of list them as quick bullet points, but try to still keep it within the 2 pages. One page is still good for a beginner.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And the other one that I got here is the person mentioned employment gaps. Like how do they handle employment gaps on resumes without drawing negative attention?
Yeah, so I would say don't try to hide it for sure. Like, for example, let's say you have, like September 2025 to say January 2025, you were in a role, and then all of 2024, you were not working. You had, maybe you were in school, maybe you were just out, supporting family. Like folks have that, maybe you're out on maternity leave, paternity leave, like, health reasons. Like, and there's a multitude of reasons why people are not working actively. I would say you don't necessarily need to call that out. Just have, like, say for example, your first role could be like, something from 2025, and then the next role is say something from 2023 or 2022 even. That's fine. A recruiter will notice that, and then if you have the skills in 2025 and then you had the other skills in say 2022, 2021, that's kind of what matters to the recruiter. So they're still going to see that, okay, this person has skill X, Y, Z. I need these skills for my role. I'm still going to call this person. And then they'll ask you on the phone, potentially, or even in your first round interview with the hiring manager, like, oh, what happened? I noticed you had a resume gap. It's typically, we don't necessarily always ask that question unless it's a very, very large gap, like it's 6 years, 5 years, or something like that. If it's a year or two, or something like that, it is kind of understood that there might have been some personal reason, and it's not really necessary for us to know that personal reason. So that's totally fine. If it's like 5 or 6 years, if it's somebody who has completely, left their career, they're coming back, or maybe they're transitioning to a new career after a gap, then in that case, you're kind of wanting to maybe focus on the more present stuff that you've done in the last 6 months, the last 3 months. I kind of list that as your professional experience, or under your professional experience, under your projects. So there are ways around it, and it's not necessarily a negative thing. I know there's this kind of thing about, oh, why do you have this gap? But don't let that deter you. It's definitely not something that, people are like, oh my God, this person has never worked or something. And if you've never worked, that's fine too, because that's kind of what you're doing with this cohort, with these programs, with these projects that you're taking on, because you're building up that professional experience that will make you valuable to your employer. So don't think of it negatively. We're not really, no one is really allowed to ask you exactly why you went on a specific leave. They might kind of ask, like, hey, it's been like maybe 6 years, it's been like 7 or 10 years that you've been in the industry. Maybe you were a nurse 10 years ago and now you're coming in to be a person in tech, and you have a 10-year gap on your resume. So unless you call that out on your resume that you used to be a nurse, in 2015, and now in 2025 you're becoming a data engineer, you're becoming a data scientist, then that sort of thing you can kind of talk about. If you are comfortable talking about it, that can be in your tell me about yourself statement. Like, hi, I used to be a nurse. I did this, and then I did X in the last 10 years, and I'm very interested in moving into tech. And because of my interest, I learned these skills, I took these certifications, I did this boot camp, I learned all of these things, and I'm looking to transition. So kind of weave that into your own tell me about yourself story. So don't own that gap. Don't feel like it's something that should deter you. And if no one asks you about it, they're not really supposed to ask you like specifically like, why did you go away for 10 years? Like, no one really wants to do that. They're not trying to prod. They're honestly, a person is just trying to see if you have that skill for them to fill that role and kind of work in that space, or that job opening that you're applying to.
Great, thank you.
Of
Thank you
course.
so much, Luna. And before I move to the other parts of my own questions, I think this person is asking, between strong resumes and strong LinkedIn optimization, which one should I focus more on as a beginner?
Oh, resume for sure. Because we will not see your LinkedIn until we see the resume. So after the recruiter sees your resume, they get it in their pile. They have like 50 resumes. They look at yours. They, okay, this person has the skills I need. Let me look them up a little bit more. So that's kind of when they will go on your LinkedIn and take a look. So level one is obviously your resume. Then level two is kind of your social validation. And if your LinkedIn is just normal, like there's a picture, there's your name, there's your location, there's a brief intro of your projects, you have a couple of connections on your LinkedIn, that is sufficient, honestly, for you to get that call for, getting a job, getting the interview for the job, essentially, not the job specifically, of course, but then getting that interview. So I would say focus on getting that resume ready, because then once you have your resume ready and you start optimizing your LinkedIn, people might reach out to you on LinkedIn and say, hey, I noticed you've been posting a lot of content. I noticed that you're working on X project. I'm looking for a collaborator. I'm looking for some freelance partner. I'm looking for somebody who could potentially volunteer. When you get that connection, when somebody knocks on your door, when somebody sends you that request, you want to be ready and say, yeah, here's my resume. Let me send it to you. So I would say focus on getting your resume, down pat, like make sure it's good. Your big resume, your small resume, like have versions of those. And then once you have that, next step should be to focus on your LinkedIn to build that social presence.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Because I remember when I was just like studying as well, like my aim was I just wanted to work on projects before I even start building my LinkedIn. But now it's you can do the two together, but ensure that you have like Luna mentioned, ensure you have a strong resume, because at the end that is also another part that will make you stand out. And we have two more questions here before we wrap it up. And the first one is, should you list soft skills like teamwork, communication, or just focus on technical ones on your resume?
I would say a couple, like maybe pick like 4 or 5 of the soft skills that you have and kind of weave that into your personal objective statement. Like, you're a strong communicator. You're able to kind of, articulate technical information, break it down for the customer, break it down, share that information information, you have a lot of team working skills, you've worked with folks remotely, you know how to work with folks in multiple different countries. Like maybe you're based in Europe, maybe you're based in Asia, and you're able to work with folks who are in Australia. Like you worked in cross collaborative environments. So kind of calling out all of those skills can kind of be built into your objective and your personal statement about who you are. Because at the top, you'll kind of have, like I'm a software developer who is XYZ and, strong communication skills, has the XY, whatever those are. I think it's good to kind of call those out there. And then you should have a section for your technical skills. Calling out your soft skills as a separate block item on your resume when you're more of a technical person is a little bit more like, it takes up space and it seems like a filler sometimes. But if you're applying to a role where you have, maybe you're looking to go into developer relations or something, or you're looking to be into like, maybe you want to be a software engineering instructor or something where you might be interfacing with a customer, or, you have to kind of, have a little bit more of a physical social presence. In that case, those kind of skills would be in your experience that you're calling out that, oh, I liaised with, so many customers, I talked to so many clients, I was able to meet with the client and understand the product and then go ahead and implement it. So those kind of skills, you can put them into your experience bullet points, but don't like have a section for soft skills. I would say that's not always required as a technical person.
Right. Thank you so much. We have one here that says, should my resume align exactly with my LinkedIn profile, or are there specific differences I should maintain between the two?
I would say try to have the experience section kind of align as much as possible. If you are somebody who worked in another industry, in another field, and you're saying you were, a nurse 10 years ago, or you've been a real estate person, or you've, been, a firefighter for some time and you're transitioning into tech, there's lots of folks like, and I'm just, referring back to folks who I've recently had in my cohort, who are coming from so many different industries like oil and gas, coming from healthcare, a lot of folks coming from healthcare into tech. So folks like that, like if you have experience like that, kind of have that on your resume, on your LinkedIn. And if you don't have that on your resume, maybe it's too old, it's 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it doesn't matter. Then that's okay to kind of have those omitted or, not included on your resume. So try to have it as close as possible for the professional skills, definitely. Sorry, not the professional skills, your professional experience or your work experience. And then if you're a new person, you don't have any company to list on, on your LinkedIn, for example, you don't have a company to tag, you can simply just say freelancer or, like, student, you're a student at DataCamp, you can kind of call that out as your experience. And then once you have your professional experience, you can kind of remove that. So try to have those dates and the times kind of, align as close as possible to your LinkedIn versus your resume. It shouldn't be like wildly different, because then it seems like once the recruiter looks at your resume and then they go to your LinkedIn and the dates are completely wrong, they might be like, oh, what's happening here? Why is there discrepancy? So you don't want to have those, little red flags come up essentially.
Hi, thank you. I know we won't be able to take all the questions, so as not to keep our guest waiting. So this will be the last question we'll be asking before my own final, what is the gap? What are the most critical elements to include in a resume to make it stand out to hiring managers?
Definitely, the thing that would be most critical would be the skills that you have, because all it is at the time, when a hiring manager is looking to hire is, I have an opening, I have a gap, I need a person on my team, I need a person who can do, X, who can do Y, who can do Z. So essentially calling that out, like making sure you definitely include that is the critical element that you should include, that I have the skill to code in Python, I have the skill to do databases, I have the skill to build a full stack application. I have the skill to understand Docker or Kubernetes. I have the skill to, understand AWS, for example, if it's a cloud team, for things like that. So kind of calling out that is very, very important. Having a technical skills, like if you wanted to have a small little blurb on your resume that says, all of your tech skills, like I know 5 languages. I do Rust, Go, Python, JavaScript, anything like Java or C, like, calling out that you can program in all of these languages, infrastructure, things that, maybe Terraform, maybe AWS, maybe Google Cloud. This is all of my cloud stuff that I know. This is all of my containerization. This is all of my certifications that I've got. So kind of calling those things out, those are critical elements, because at the end of the day, you are applying for a technical role. So that means you will be expected to do some technical work. So that is the highlight. Everything else that you have, the extras, like maybe you won awards, maybe won a scholarship and things, those are also great to list. But the first thing that the candidate, the hiring manager and the person who the recruiter is going to look for is, do they have that technical skill that the job requires? So make sure that those are clearly highlighted. And that's kind of where the work comes in, right? When the job description says, I need you to have Python, I need you to have MySQL, I need you to have Google Cloud. Say, I'm just giving a hypothetical example. Like these are the three tech skills I need. Make sure the resume has those three things listed somewhere. So because that's going to be what gets you the call for the next round or for the first round.
All right. Thank you so much, Luna. I'm so sorry we won't be able to um take more questions because of time. Sakib, um, reach out to me if you have like any other questions. Personally, I will try as much as possible to answer them, but we don't want to hold our facilitator for too long. And just to be able to like bring all this to an end, I know you mentioned that you started your journey from Cisco. And what is one piece of advice that you wish you had when you were building your first resume on LinkedIn?
I think it would be to not have that imposter syndrome because that's something where you feel like I have this skill, I've done this project, but it's not big enough. It's too small. I don't want to list it. So I think I kind of was like, oh, I will not list this on my resume until it is like, level 100. But that's kind of the beauty of being a beginner. Like you don't need to be level 100. Even if you're at level 10, you're level 20, you're level 30, you should still go ahead and list that experience, list that project. Like maybe you might think, look at the project and say, oh, this is so small. It's just a little app. Anybody could code this. I don't want to list this on there. I would say still list that, because especially if you don't have a lot of projects to list, don't let that deter you from not putting yourself out there or putting out those projects because it might seem small to you, but that's okay because you're a beginner. It's fine if that project is still small. Folks who are looking for somebody who's in a beginner role, they will still value that project. So I would say don't have that imposter syndrome of saying that my certification is not important enough, or my project is not important enough, or my transferable skills are not important enough. That's another thing. Like maybe folks are coming from other industries and they're like, oh, I have nothing in my previous role that can translate into this. So I shouldn't list that role at all. So I would say don't have that imposter syndrome, kind of list that. Even if you might have even done a lot of volunteer work, and in that volunteer work, you might have picked up a lot of skills like budgeting, planning, collaborating, project management. Project management is also a huge part of software development, of being in the tech industry in general. So having that kind of information on there, don't limit yourself, but don't go more than 2 pages. Of course, I know I've said that at the start, but don't feel shy or nervous about I shouldn't put this on my resume because it's not valuable enough. That imposter syndrome is something I feel like holds people back. So own your skill, try to make your statements as powerful as possible. And if that's something you're struggling with, like this is a project that I have, it seems too small. That's why we have AI tools now, right? It's so much easier now to kind of make your bullet points more strong and make it more impactful, because even for us, maybe we falter in making that statement or that project to really shine, but you can use an AI tool to kind of get that bullet point really strong and say, you know what, I made a to-do list app, a nice and simple app that you built with React or something. It might seem simple, but you can kind of make that seem powerful. And don't say I'm not going to include this on my resume just because it's too small. Make sure you own your skills and don't have that imposter syndrome is what I'll say.
Hey, thank you so much, Lubna. Thank you. Like
Of course.
this is really insightful. Personally, I've been able to I just said on some few things for myself. And I hope it is also the same for people. I know we have questions that we want to ask, but this has really been so helpful for us. Thank you so much, Lubna. And we really appreciate your time.
Of
And
course.
yeah, I know that is it fine if some of the mentees connect with you on LinkedIn, if you don't mind, because
Yeah.
I know like that is also another question that can we connect with our facilitator on LinkedIn? So I decided to like
Yeah.
check out and see if they can connect with you on LinkedIn. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, please go ahead. Do you might have my LinkedIn, Rihanna, I think.
Yes, I do have that.
Okay,
And I'll be sending an
perfect.
email to them with your LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much. By
For
the way, this
sure.
session is also recorded because we have some mentees in another country based on like time difference, especially in Asia, that will have to like upload on our YouTube so they could rewatch it during their own time as well. So thank you so much for
Of
joining.
course.
And we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here. Hope this was helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right, thank you, everyone. I'll be bringing this session to an end. Please send me a message or either an email or a message on Slack if you have any question relating to this session. But we'll be uploading this in the coming days, so you also have access to it on YouTube if you want to rewatch anything. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Take care all. Bye.